All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Drew tells me that in Long Beach, California, it is 72 with a peaceful breeze coming off the ocean and the weather is perfect. It's raining in Stamford, Connecticut. Pretty miserable, but that's okay. We're going to talk today about worst to first candidates in their division in the AFC. We'll talk about some long shot prices in the conference. So let's start at the bottom. Start with the AFC South, Drew, where the Houston Texans finished last year, going 3-13-1. Do you think there's any scope for the Texans to be a division winner?
You know, there were times this season as I was going through their roster and kind of grading some of the players, particularly looking at the defensive side of the ball, and I had an inkling of this might be a buy low spot, actually. They're deep. I liked the DeMeco Ryans hire. DeMeco. I like the Ryans hire, and I think ultimately the pieces that they've invested on this team, while I strongly disagree with the process that they've gone about to get here, it's a lot better than the Texans teams we've seen run out there in the past. That said, trying to come up with a fair matchup against the likes of the Jaguars, I have them not within a field goal, not at home, and certainly not on the road. And so it's tough for me to really kind of get behind a team that is going to rely pretty heavily on a quarterback injury at the top of the division in order to really open the door for them. I do think that CJ Stroud presents kind of a safer rookie quarterback profile than some of the other guys out there. He's not a guy that takes a ton of risks, and he's not necessarily anywhere close to the same high ceiling as a guy like Anthony Richardson. So if you are enthusiastic about the Texans, I think long shot price in division is probably the angle you want to play over like CJ Stroud rookie of the year or something like that. Cause but it's going to rely on the Jaguars and particularly Trevor Lawrence not being effective or not being available this season. And right now, I think one of those two is very unlikely, and the other one is tough for me to see, just considering his resilience through the years. So, could the Texans finish second? Is a more interesting question, because now I'm kind of thinking, okay, this could come to fruition. The defense, I think, is borderline top 10 as rostered, assuming they kind of find the right pieces, and assuming that the young secondary takes a step forward. And at that point, it's only going to take about, I think, 8 wins to get second in the AFC South, and at that point, I could see the Texans being in the mix for that. So for me, it's a no bet, but I do think I've been kind of positively surprised with what I've seen as I've gone through the roster pretty carefully with this team.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, I think it's a question of whether it's better to bet Texans 11-1 or DeMeco Ryans 30-1 to win Coach of the Year. At that point, the problem is that it's so hard to see that team getting to 11 or 12 wins. And if he were to sneak out the division at 9-8, that means the rest of the division has been terrible. And would he actually get that much credit, like Coach of the Year level credit? Because Coach of the Year goes to like the story of the season. And even the Texans, even if they won the division at 9-8 or something, are they the story of the season? Like maybe. I would probably rather back DeMeco at 30-1 at that point. And I think that as a general rule, like this is the type of division where you want to be hunting for long shots, because the Jags, I think we both like the Jags, and the Jags are expected to be, a 10-7 type team, and they're the clear best team in the division. But, they're not the Chiefs, they're not the Eagles, they're not the Cowboys. This isn't an established juggernaut. And so even last year, like I bet the Texans last year, like 80-1 to win the division, just on the idea that, this team looks terrible, but 3 other teams in the division and none of them are juggernauts. So random stuff can happen in the NFL, and a team with no juggernaut in the division should just never really be 80-1 to win it. I didn't really come close, as you would expect, but this year, 11-1 isn't super appetizing. What do you think of DeMeco Ryans? So I think he is a guy who is held in extremely high regard in the NFL, and I think that he would get credit. It's just whether the Texans could actually be good enough to vault him to that kind of level.
I stand entirely with you on the concept of 9-8 division winners he's not getting enough of a lion's share, I don't think, to vault him, even though we're coming off of a year where 9 wins was enough. So that said, Houston's not New York. And I think the New York bump absolutely helped Abel. And, the Houston Texans and whoever wins the AFC South is going to be considered the 8th best division winner, kind of heading into the playoff picture. So that definitely dings him. I just in terms of, projections here, I've finished my season sims. I've got my projected rosters built out. I'm pretty much fixed now on my win total projections here. I'm projecting the Texans to win 10 or more games 2.9% of the time. So 3%. So 30 to 1's not getting it done for me. I'd need a bigger number. And just kind of real quick, the DeMeco Ryans, excuse me. He's taken over for a franchise that has fired their last 2 coaches after year 1. You bet Texans to win the South at a huge price last year. I had Lovie Smith, first coach, fired. Matt Rule chalked that one out, but still, like the fact that they've had turnover now 2 times in a row, there will certainly be a media embrace of Ryans if this team takes a step forward this year. People will be very, very positive about the way he is. His campaign will be reported and reflected at a national level if this team is flirting with 500, particularly if they're above 500. So I don't think you can entirely rule it out. But again, like with only a 3% chance of them getting into the double digits, I think I have to pass.
Yep, that's fair. I think the thing to remember with Daboll as well is that, yes, he was 9 wins, but also the last game of the season for them was completely meaningless. They didn't play anyone, and they only had 6 losses going into that. So it was like a 9-6-1 case. And yeah, he shouldn't have won. So that's
plus the second last game of the season, when you can beat the Colts that badly, that's worth like 3 wins. It's super impressive.
The revisionist history that the Giants had a 3.5 win total going into last season when they're actually 7 flat back to the over and went over by 2 and a bit because you give them the tie to some extent. But that's okay. I haven't made any bets on anyone to win this division. I would like to bet the Titans if they had just like one good offensive lineman. But I can't get involved with that offensive line at this point, and they don't have an easy schedule to start. So I think the Jags should take it so long as Lawrence stays healthy. Let's go to the AFC West, where there is arguably a more compelling candidate to go worst to first. So you're gonna have to jump over Patrick Mahomes. The Denver Broncos were 5-12 last year, and they have a lot of elements that would give you confidence that they could make a significant leap. One, last year, they were better than a 5-12 win team. If you look at their point differential, they should have had an extra win and a bit over that. They've obviously had the coaching change. I think on average, they should have better health, though that hasn't gotten off to a great start with everyone getting hurt. So we've talked about this before, but it's a good experiment for just how much does the coach matter. And can Sean Payton, is he worth 3-4 wins more than Nathaniel Hackett? I just struggle to see this team having the ceiling to get over both of Kansas City and the Chargers. Yeah, it's absolutely conceivable to me that they could finish second in the division and get a wild card, but to get over both of those teams who just seem to be, particularly the Chiefs, obviously, in a much better state. I'm not rushing to back the Broncos at plus 650, but what do you think of Denver?
Yeah, no, the points you made about the AFC South and why that division has the type of DNA where you do want to look for long shots turns this one into a don't, right? There's not one hit could take Trevor Lawrence out for the campaign, and that's wide open. This division, you need something to happen to both Pat Mahomes and Justin Herbert for this to really open up. And that's a very, very tough thing to see. It's basically twice as hard, twice as unlikely. And in fact, the way that Mahomes avoids contact the way that Herbert has been able to play through some pretty significant injuries. Really, both players played through significant injuries, makes it even that much less likely that that the door is going to fly open here. So the Broncos, attrition at the wide receiver position concerns me significantly. The Broncos having weaknesses on the offensive line concerns me. The Broncos having a backup plan in Jarrett Stidham, who they might want to kick the tires on if it's not working out with Russ Wilson, concerns me. I have gone from sort of a neutral, I can acknowledge the upside with this team, to a pessimist about the Broncos over the balance of this preseason. And a lot of it just has to do with, kind of recognizing that Sean Payton, they gave up meaningful assets to bring him on board. This is not a guy that has to deliver results in year one in order to have a long-term future in the Rockies. They can absolutely treat this season as we need to evaluate players 2 through 53 on this roster and make some tough decisions this offseason and start our rebuild in 2024. That is well within the range of outcomes for this team. I think that's more likely even than, getting to the second in what is a very top-heavy AFC West. And, I've been, cold-ish on the Chargers, I guess. But, the fact of the matter is they're healthier right now, and they haven't been bitten with the injury bug yet. And as long as that team is not dipping into the reserves, they're going to be a menace. So Chiefs obviously stand at the top with a bullet, and Chargers would be your backup there otherwise. And the Broncos, I think, are more likely to be picking in the top 5 than they are in winning the AFC West by my numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the Broncos as well, a lot of some of their upside is being hit by the injuries they've suffered. Jerry Jeudy looks like he's going to miss a few weeks now, in addition to Tim Patrick going down. And so now, Marvin Mims is going to be starting at receiver opposite Cortland Sutton week 1, you would expect. I also think that there's Broncos plus 650 to win the division. I would rather just back Sean Payton to win Coach of the Year in the 14-1, 15-1 range if you are particularly bullish about the Broncos, because 2 things there. One, unlike DeMeco Ryans in the AFC South, I don't think there's nearly as many ranges of outcomes where Sean Payton takes the division at 9-8, just because if they take the division, it's likely going to take 12, 13 wins, you would expect. And he's obviously going to get a lot more credit for winning the AFC West than Ryans would get for winning the AFC South, I think. And so I think that is probably the best way to attack it, because the other thing is that if the Broncos are really good, 13-4 win the division good, it's so easy to identify the coaching of that improvement. It'll be the easiest Coach of the Year case in history, going from Hackett to Payton. Sean Payton fixes Russell Wilson. There is that easy narrative there. And so I think that he would get all the credit in the world. So, yeah, I'm not particularly bullish Broncos either. And it's difficult to construct a way that they would win the division without an injury to Patrick Mahomes specifically. But if you are bullish Broncos, I would say you're better off just backing Sean Payton to win Coach of the Year. All right. Before we get into the AFC North, a reminder that with the NFL season quickly approaching, now is the perfect time to get your RotoWorld Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Get ready for your draft and stay one step ahead of your league during the preseason with updated player rankings, profiles, projections, mock drafts, and more. Go to NBCSports.com/draft guide and use code DRAFT2023 to save 20% at checkout. All right, AFC North. We've got a team here that finished last in Cleveland at 7-10. That is a bit shorter to go worst to first than the first 2 teams we've talked about. They are plus 375 to win what the market is making a relatively flat AFC North, where the Bengals are favorites at plus 155, and the Ravens plus 220. Browns, as I mentioned, and then the Steelers are plus 450. I am growing lukewarm on the Cleveland Browns. I know you've been lukewarm the whole time. I was a bit more bullish just thinking about the variance and upside of Deshaun Watson. And I try not to read too much into training camp reports, except when the reports are negative, because it's an environment that is just prone to overinflation on the positive side of a person's performance. But when the reports are that Deshaun Watson looks terrible, that's a little bit of a red flag. And I mean, I think the market, certainly at the end of last season, in terms of game-to-game lines, was pricing in not Houston Deshaun Watson being there, but certainly that there was going to be at least a middle ground between his terrible performances in a Cleveland jersey and his, top 5 quarterback in the NFL, Houston performances. And that didn't really bear fruit. And he was overrated by the market, I think, pretty consistently at the end of last season. And now this price is reflecting that he is going to be somewhat back. And I think the Steelers are just a better team than Cleveland at this point. But what do you think?
I think that overall the North is flat as can be. Schedule neutralizes things in my numbers to a degree. But and there's some talent gaps, obviously, with particularly in certain positional groups. Browns Steelers, to me, they are very, very, very close. And but the bottom, the tail, the left tail, which is bad for the Browns, is substantially bigger because of the uncertainty that you just mentioned about Deshaun Watson and his fit with the system, and really just his ability to perform at a 2019 level, which, by the way, it was a long time ago. So I think realistically, the Steelers, overall distribution, even if the medians are similar to the Browns, to me, I like the upside better. And overall, I think, but overall, I think the North is pretty flat between these 4 teams. And I think realistically, the winner of the AFC North is probably going to be the 4 seed, just because their schedules are super tough. And they play they have to play each other. They're going to beat each other up. So that definitely makes things interesting from taking a long shot standpoint. And I just want to, kind of point out that there was a pretty important and interesting Browns development, Jay. Somewhat recently, you probably caught news. They traded they traded QB2. QB2 is gone, which moves Dorian Thompson. DTR? Yeah, DTR has moved up into QB2 spot, Jay. So just buckle up for post week 4. We're recapping what happened in the NFL. The Browns are 0-4. Deshaun Watson is dealing with some sort of very vague lower body injury that's unclear. And we're banging the table. We're like, here comes DTRJ. Browns 50-1 to win the North. I'm going to make that case at some point. Because like the fact of the matter is 2 through 53 on this Browns roster is outstanding. And they have cap room, which means that, everybody who works in that building, coach, GM, scouts, they all recognize like success or death this year, right? And that's a scary proposition if you're not succeeding early. And so, I'm prepared for a little bit of chaos. I'm prepared for a little bit of chips in the table. It may not ultimately manifest anything at all. They may be a 4-12 team and everybody's fired. Like that's possible. But I think the talent on the roster outside of, what we have an enormous question mark at the quarterback position is enough that, I'm not as nervous with the Browns if Watson just gets hurt. I'm not saying Robinson's going to win Rookie of the Year and take this team to the playoffs or anything like that, but I do see a world where it would be somewhat of a lateral move and the market might absolutely sell the Browns beyond the point of their fair value, considering how good some of the other pieces are. So I'm not into the Browns now. I'm probably not ever going to be into the Browns this year. But the scope for them, being a bet at a super ridiculous price, I think it's something worth monitoring.
What price do you think it is that Deshaun Watson stays healthy and gets benched at some point this year? I mean, given like they've got $250 million owed to him guaranteed, so I think it's pretty close to 0%.
It's pretty close to 0, yeah. But ineffectiveness, benching for ineffectiveness seems very unlikely. But if he's not performing well and he's dealing with some sort of nagging injury, right? Like let's just say like week 2 against the Steelers, TJ Watt takes him down and just a nasty ankle sprain. And he tries to play through it in week 3 and loses again. He tries to play through it in week 4 and he loses again. Right. Like they're like some sort of vague, like, okay, we're going to give him a couple weeks off and we're going to kick the tires on DTR like that. I don't think that's crazy. And, you know, they may ultimately, bring him back this season. And who really knows? Like the range of outcomes for Deshaun Watson in 2023 is as wide as any quarterback that I can remember, really and truly. Like I really, really don't know what is going to happen here. So the uncertainty, when the uncertainty bands are that big, find ways to get involved with enormous prices. I'll never forget really good professional player back in the day looked at the Dallas Cowboys. He said, man, this team is stacked. They're ready to pop. They are going to be a factor in every way. But Tony Romo is one hit away from, just calling it a career. I'm going to grab some Dak Prescott rookie of the year, 500 to 1.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, he was the co-choice with Zeke Elliott that year, and 500 to 1 was a winning play. So when you have big uncertainty surrounding the quarterback position, I think you really and truly have to look for just absolutely wild big prices to try to capture that uncertainty in some quantifiable way.
Yep, I think that makes sense. Last one before we move on, and this is kind of depressing, but do you think if he had the best case that Deshaun Watson would win MVP? Or do you think that is just a complete write-off? Because my thought there is that if it is at all close, then people would justify voting for anyone else. But if he had far and away the best case, I think he would actually win. And he's definitely not a bet at the current prices or anything, but that's, it's a pretty dark thing to try and price in a way, but I think he would actually win if he was the best candidate by margin.
Okay. In that world, I'm hitting that with a different angle. Browns Super Bowl ticket in pocket. Okay. Sure. If he's the best case by margin, that means the Browns are the 1 seed. That means they have all of the AFC leverage in the world. And the uncertainty around what a voter will ultimately do with him as a candidate is enough to say, okay, well, knowing that information, that, you know, if you're basically saying this, that he has the best case, you know, give me Brown Super Bowl, because if that in that world, this team is an absolute truck. And it's about the same price, isn't it, in the ballpark?
Yeah, well, he's like 30 to 1 to win MVP, that type of range, which I would not get involved with now. But yeah, the Browns, they certainly have the upside, where if he is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL like he was in Houston, then they are pretty close to the best team in football, I would think. Certainly not far off. All right, before we get to the AFC East, a reminder, MLB Sunday leadoff heads to Texas. No, it actually heads to New York. I'm getting ahead of myself. The Angels face the Mets this Sunday. Shohei Ohtani, he will be playing. He's going to continue to DH despite the torn UCL in his elbow. So you can check this game out Sunday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern on Peacock this Sunday. And might be the last time in a while to see Shohei Ohtani if he does get the procedure. So save a Shohei while you can, and hopefully it all works out for him, because he's not going to get quite the contract that he might have. But I'm sure he will be okay. All right, let's close out with the AFC East. The New York Jets finished last, 7-10 last season. The Bills are the favorite in the division, plus 125. Jets second favorite, plus 250. Dolphins 3 to 1. Patriots 8 to 1. Where are you at on the Jets? Are you buying into the optimism, or do you think it's a bit overdone?
I'm starting to get it to the place where I'm legitimately taking a stand against the Jets. Okay. And it's really tough, Jay, because this defense is full of players that I like fully adore. Like, I watch this. I want to watch this defense every week. I want to see them kick butt. Like, I'm very, very excited to see Sauce Gardner in year 2. Wave after wave of just elite pass rushing talent on the line with Quinnen Williams. Like, this is a really, really, really awesome unit. And on the other side of the ball, I have just a laundry list of question marks that starts with the offensive coordinator, who I rate as the 32nd best in the NFL. There are a chunk of coordinators from 20 to 31 who we really don't know anything about. And I put Nathaniel Hackett behind all of them because every clip and every time I revisit the Denver Broncos 2022 campaign, I am more and more concerned about how he will ultimately control the reins in New York. And there are a lot of people that have been like, dude, chill out. Like, this is the Aaron Rodgers show. Like, he's really the de facto coordinator here. Like, this is, you don't need to, be reactionary, but just the small stuff, the procedural stuff, the ways in which an offense ultimately is conducted at an NFL level needs to at least have discipline and precision, if not, novelty. And he brought none of that last year with the Broncos. And I worry that with the questions swirling around the offensive line and, some of the skill position players being a little bit untested and unproven and maybe not quite as good as the market rates, that this Jets team is going to be fighting battles, trying to win 17-14 every week. And, you could get into a situation not unlike what we saw with Denver last year, where the Broncos defense was like, guys, we're giving you the opportunity. Just get us to 15 points and we beat the Colts, guys. That shouldn't be a tough ask. And yet they lose 12-9, so it's tough for me to be this sincerely, in believing that the Jets offense is going to underwhelm, considering that they have a Hall of Fame quarterback. It's tough, but Aaron Rodgers' skill set is kind of breaking away from what is working in today's NFL in a small way. New system, new environment, new pieces, bad offensive coordinator, all of it is enough for me to be pessimistic about the Jets. And we haven't even gotten to how tough their schedule is to start this season. So you add in a little bit of a spice of, we could get to 1-5 here in our first 6 games, and it wouldn't shock me considering how difficult they're matched up, against who they're matched up against and how difficult those tests are going to be. And at that point, who knows what the media environment swirling around this team is, and what the pressure is going to be like in that locker room and on the offensive unit in particular. So for me, Jets are a pass this year. If they ultimately go on to win the Super Bowl, I hope everybody who's a Jets fan enjoys the run. You deserve it. You've had a miserable, couple of decades here waiting for an opportunity to be excited. And, I needed to see a better decision about the offensive coordinator to have any kind of positive feeling about this unit.
Yeah. I mean, the argument is that they started last season 7-4, and now they replace Zach Wilson, Mike White, and Joe Flacco with Aaron Rodgers. A lot of that was built on, one of the handful of best defenses in the league, which on paper it should be again, but defense is, as we talked about, much more variable than offense year to year, just because it is dependent on turnovers and more randomness. And then, I mean, you raised it with the offensive line, like Dwayne Brown might just be done. Mekhi Becton needs to be good for the offensive line to be good. They get AVT back, which will help. But I think the biggest question mark about the team in a way is that Aaron Rodgers wasn't that good last year. And if he's not a top 10, if he's not back to being a top 10 quarterback, because he wasn't last year. I mean, EPA per play is worse than guys like Jacoby Brissett last year. And I think he's going to be better than Jacoby Brissett this year. But at the same time, if they're not getting that top 5, at least top 10 level quarterback out of Rodgers, then it's just hard to compete in an AFC with Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and co. And I think my skepticism about the Jets in terms of winning the division is more built around optimism around Buffalo, which we've talked about, where I think the gap between those teams, like I would say that they're a tier apart. And so, not much interest in getting involved with the Jets at plus 250. I'm not sure there's really many ways to bet the Jets. I don't think like Rodgers is 16-1 to win MVP. That's not nearly appetizing enough. Robert Saleh, I don't think would get that much credit unless they get the 1 seed, because Rodgers has come in and people will just give Rodgers the credit for coming in. Sauce Gardner, Defensive Player of the Year. It's just so hard for a cornerback to win that award. And I think it'd be so dependent on interceptions or them being viewed as far and away the best defense, which, he could win Defensive Player of the Year, but his price is in like the 15-1 type of range, which couldn't get involved with at all. So, yeah, I'm not sure there's any real way to bet the Jets. Is there anything that you think is appetizing?
Yes. I played a regular season lowest scoring team. You want to guess the best price I got?
A big one. What?
It was a big one. Yeah. 56-1 was the best price I got for that. So sorry, I'm all out here. It's going to be fun and interesting talking about the Jets all season, whether they do well or whether they do poorly. They're going to be featured week in, week out as we try to dissect what is going on there. And honestly, there's a couple of pretty clear bellwether games for this team. And really, there's really just one in the first 6 games that I need to see. And it is against the division foe Patriots. Okay. If this is same old, Bill Belichick just running circles around your offense and keeping you in the, low teens, I think we are talking about, hitting the emergency button with this team overall reaching their potential. So that one's the one that I have circled, in pen. And I think is going to tell us a lot one way or the other because it happens week 3. So you'll have a couple of games under your belt as with the ones. Breece Hall's not going to be back, at least in full effort level, if he is back at all. You'll have a couple of weeks to get the offensive line, to find some cohesion, figure out roles, responsibilities. If the Patriots ultimately keep you, well under your team total there, then I think it's time to pull the ripcord.
Yeah, and for just anyone who doesn't know how the Jets' schedule starts, Buffalo at Dallas, New England, Kansas City, at Denver, Philadelphia, going into their bye. Then even after that, there's just no easy prey on the schedule. Then it's at Giants, Chargers, at Raiders, at Buffalo, Miami. It's so difficult to just chalk up easy wins against that schedule. So yeah, I'd be pretty. I think I'm on the cooler side on the Jets. I'm with you there. All right. Before we get out of here, just a reminder that there is a live college football betting Q&A Saturday, August 26th, 11 a.m. Eastern. So that'll be today when you're listening to this or watching it. Vaughn Dalzell, Brad Thomas, and Eric Froton are answering users' college football betting questions for week 0, including big matchups between Navy and Notre Dame, San Jose State versus USC, and more. You can check that out on the NBC Sports YouTube page. All right, we are done. Drew, don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. And a reminder to find all your favorite NBC shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.